Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I'm the Strategy Professor, and today we're going to be looking at the patch notes for 9.15 for Teamfight Tactics. So, as always, if you enjoy the content, please be sure to leave a like and subscribe on YouTube. Come check me out on Twitch. I start streaming every night around 9:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. You drop a follow there if you have a Twitch Prime. You enjoy this content, you want to support a little bit, you can always drop that as well. Anything is greatly appreciated in terms of likes, clicks, subs, anything of the sort. Okay, and as always, you'll find timestamps in the description if you don't have time to watch the whole thing. And don't forget, if you're watching it on YouTube, you can go to the little cog and like speed up the time if you want it to go faster to like 1.25 or 1.5. If you think it takes a little bit too long or you're intimidated by like whatever, might be like a 45-minute video or something, you can always speed it up a little bit there as well. But let's go ahead and get in here. And I'm going to do a more thorough meta breakdown probably tomorrow that I'll release. And I'll also do a tier list tomorrow, so stay tuned for that. And I'm still doing traditional league content as well. So I'll have a separate patch notes video, separate tier lists, and everything for that as well. So all of that's up there, so be sure to check it out. Okay, let's go ahead and get through here. So things that I would like to see just coming in, just some really brief commentary on the past meta. Like demons need to get nerfed hard, and gunslingers need to get nerfed hard. I feel like every single game that I played in Platinum was just straight demons or gunslingers, like some variation of that. Like 6 out of the 8 people were running that, and the 2 people that weren't running that were in 7th and 8th place usually. Now I tried running Yordles, which I thought was pretty good against gunslingers, but it wasn't as good as I thought, and we'll talk about why here in just a little bit. There's something that kind of didn't make a lot of sense. On hit actually still triggered on dodges for some reason, so if you dodged something with a Yordle, you were still hit by the on hit effects 100% of the time. So that was pretty troll. I didn't realize that was a thing, but they fixed that this patch. So anyways, that's something that I want to see. I want to see demons knocked out. I want to see gunslingers knocked out coming in. I want to see like shrink just removed from the game. I don't think they're going to do that, but I think shrink is OP. Just a lot of the on-hit interaction stuff and demons is what I would like to see nerfed out of the meta. But I've already looked through this, so I know what's happened. But that's just my thoughts coming in, what I'm thinking coming in the patch notes, the biggest stuff that I want to see. Because I feel like the meta was a lot more robust before the last patch. But before then, there were like different Volibear comps that were pretty viable. I think gunslingers were viable, assassins were viable. And demons were viable. So I think there were at least 4 different comps that were in like, and Yordles I think were pretty good too, under the table. So I think there were probably like 5 different comps that were all like pretty legit that you could go. But it feels like this patch there was really only 2, and like, you know, Yordle maybe, but against smart players it doesn't. Like if they have rapid fire cannon and red buff, it doesn't work. Anyways, let's look at this. Okay, so win streaks, loss streaks. So you get more gold if you're on a win streak or a loss streak. Okay, cool. Probably won't make a huge... I mean, I guess that makes the early game a lot more important, so you really want to try to roll for experience if possible and get out good comps like Noble Knights, which are both getting buffs on this patch, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. So if you can get an early game lead and get up to 4, then you can start getting benefits off of that. So that is an indirect nerf to... maybe to gunslingers. It's because like gunslingers do not like to level up. They like to stay low level and try to roll for gold a lot of the time. But they do end up with a lot of silver champs because of that. So usually they are pretty strong early game depending on the items that they get. But if you can get, you know, 1 or 2 levels on them, and you also have silver champs because you aren't rolling for gold, you're just going for experience and keeping your silvers, then you can get an advantage on them early. So that's potentially a nerf to gunslingers, a little win, so that's nice. Okay, so they are basically telling you they're about to add some more champions in the future that are gunslingers, brawlers, shapeshifters, and blade masters. You can speculate as you will about those champions. I'm not going to do that in this video, but it is fun to think about, you know, what could happen. There's no other explanation for why they would increase the cap on these types of champs. So pretty cool. I think there are some other... you know, shapeshifters, I guess, could use a little love. But like gunslingers and blade masters are already pretty good, so I wish they'd release some different classes of champions that are a little more downtrodden. or that need more like nobles. For nobles are getting buffed on this patch. Just champions where it's like you have to get exactly these 6 champions to get the full thing. I guess Blade Masters are one of those. Blade Master has an item though, where you can turn someone into a Blade Master, but the stuff that requires exactly 6 specific champions, I think, is a little rough. So it'd be nice if there were more options, more than 6 options to do that. But anyways, okay, player damage. Looks like across the board, people are taking less damage. I really like how they're reducing damage from spiderlings. I wish they would just take out the spiderling damage. I think it's pretty troll. When they have like 3 spiders out at the end of a match, taking 6. I guess now you're going to take 3. That's not as bad. Yeah, and then just across the board, it's basically 1 less damage in almost all scenarios. So, you know, if you think that, you know, like maybe there's 6 champions on the board on average, you're going to be taking 6 less damage per hit. So that, depending on all the variables and stuff like that, it's probably going to give you about 20 to 25% more health total. Which is cool. I mean, that's going to open up if you need to go like rank 8 champions, or you really need to fish for a tier 6 to make your like comp really pop, or a tier 5 champion rather. I think this is going to help that out. So this is going to help out things like nobles specifically, where you have to fish for KO to really make them work. So it's a pretty big buff to nobles that you have more time to look, and that you can actually level up to rank 7 and possibly rank 8 without trolling if you get a little bit ahead, so you have a higher chance of getting her. So that's nice for that. There's a couple other, it's mostly because nobles have to have KO, or like they're pretty bad, at least historically. That's the only one that's like 6 that's like hard to get, like really hard to get to. Like you have no other option. You have to have KO. I mean, sorcerers, 6 sorcerers, I believe you can get without Karthus, although it's helpful. Blade Masters, you can get without Yasuo if you have the Blade of the Ruined King, but it's nice and give you more chances for the Yasuo. So pretty good buff to champs that want either need 8 champs to make their comp work, or that are really fishing for tier 5. So nobles immediately come to mind, but there could be others. Available units 9, so you're going to have less options at the carousel. So you're just going to have to be able to make it work, and that's going to put more pressure on like the number 1 and number 2 seeds. That's going to allow more comeback mechanics, because it's less likely that they're going to get the item that they really need, or the champion that they really need to improve their comp significantly. So that's another nerf to that. And then this also, like, early game comps. So that's also, like, gunslingers, I think would be considered pretty early game. Like, you're really, like, hyper rolling for the gold star. I just thought of that. And your econ sucks, typically, so the econ advantage compounds and stacks over time. So I think, you know, depending on what you're doing, that comp's still going to be pretty good, but these are a couple of, like, structural nerfs. And you're, like, if you're rolling for that, there's a decent chance you're going to be high up, like 4th or higher, because you're going to get silvers on your champs really early. So yeah, this could be potentially triple, double, maybe triple nerf to them. So that's good. Okay, assassins. So this is a massive nerf to assassins, I think. So now basically what this means is assassins jump earlier, non-assassins champ move is slowed at the start of combat, and assassins can be targeted sooner. Basically what this says to me is if someone sits in a corner, you're not going to be able to get on their back line. Basically, I'll have to watch it in action, but that's what this sounds like. So it sounds like if you stack all of your stuff in a corner, then there's no way assassins get to your back line, and they have to hit your front line, and they're going to get destroyed. So I think that's pretty much rip assassins there if someone corner stacks like that. Most assassins anyways. So looks pretty rough. I'm not sure. I think assassins were already like very weak on this patch after the massive nerf, like the 25% damage nerf to them last patch. So I'm not really sure why they decided to nerf them again this patch. Like, this is a very, very hard nerf. This is even worse than the 25%, because the whole point of assassins is getting on the back line. Like, the only reason you would even think of running assassins is to try to kill that, you know, gold Tristana on the back line that's got 3 items, right? So that maybe you can kill her before she deletes your team. or like the Draven. Maybe you have a prayer of killing the Draven if he doesn't have enough lifesteal or peel on his team. Now you're just not going to have an answer for it. I mean, you already can't really use Blitzcrank against intelligent positioning. You know, if they put the Draven or the Tristana or whatever relatively in the middle of the map and just line everything up, like there's no geometrical way you can pull that champion with Blitzcrank. It's always going to pull somebody else because Blitz is always the furthest champion. So as long as that, like, their carries relatively in the middle of the map, you can't use Blitz to counter them either. So how do you counter them? You don't have Assassins. You don't have Blitz. I don't know. You ask me. Or you tell me, right? When they have, you know, you got Rapid Fire Cannon on Triss and she shoots across the whole map, or Draven, you know, they're not going to have to move. And so, don't like this change at all. I don't know why they're so opposed to Assassins in this game, but they refuse to nerf them in, like, traditional League of Legends because they're super frustrating in solo queue for traditional League of Legends. But in this one, people cry about Assassins, like, one patch, and they just get gutted 2 patches in a row. But anyways, okay, so Evelyn's attack damage plus 10, whatever. It's not going to matter if you don't get to their back line. A little bit of extra damage on her ult, cool. I mean, it, like, I guess if you can somehow get Assassins, like, fit 3 Assassins into a comp that really wants them to stack up. So if you have a lot of AoE damage with Assassins, I don't know, Ninja Assassins with Elementals or something, and you've got, like, Brand, like a hyperfed Brand, or an Aurelian Soul, you wouldn't really get Assassins with that, like, a Wild Dragons build. I don't know, maybe there's a build where you want them to stack up. I mean, the old Volley Void Brawler Assassins that I mentioned before on the channel could be interesting with this, because you want them to stack up with Volibear and Cho'Gath. You want them to just hang out in the little corner. But it's like, even like with this, it sounds like even if they just do the standard lineup thing along the back wall, the Assassins still aren't going to get to them, and they're going to be relatively spread out against AoE also. So, I don't know. If it feels bad. Like, if you're going to do this, fine, but, like, revert the nerf so that you can actually chew through tanks with most Assassins. Or, like, add in some kind of armor penetration or something. Percentage health damage. I guess they have that with red buff, but anyway. So, they're buffing a couple of Assassins. The Rengar is interesting, like, because Rengar's been buffed several patches in a row here. So at rank 2, he's getting 0.7 extra attack speed. His base attack speed is 0.6. The attack damage is 7. And that's actually very relevant because he does physical damage. And attack damage also affects crit. So Rengar is one who's interesting. Like, maybe with, like, Wilds or, like, the Void Brawler Assassins, like, he's part of that I use. And I use that to climb from, like, Iron 1 to Platinum 4 in, like, 3 or 4 days. That was before they nerfed Volley and Akali and Assassins. Anyway, so, interesting, I guess. I don't like it. Yeah, but there is no deeper counterplay. Like, the counterplay is just put your back line against the wall and they never touch them, is what it sounds like. Like, that's not counterplay. That's just what people do anyways, that just hard counters Assassins. Like, there's not a choice there. Like, the counterplay was against Assassins, you would put something that you wanted them to jump on the back line. Like, your weakest champion that you don't mind if it dies, you would actually put that in the corner where you thought the Assassins were going to go and get them to jump on that champion. And then they would still kill that champion, but then they would be on the back lines. Then you'd be on the clock. You'd have to, like, kill their front line before the Assassins killed your back line. That was counterplay, and that was interesting sometimes. It's like, okay, how am I going to line up? And am I going to go left corner or right corner? Am I going to put my weak champion? You know, where am I going to put it? Where am I going to put my carry on the back line to position them? Am I just going to leave a tank on the back line instead of the front line so that they can tank the Assassins? Like, I thought that at higher level play, there definitely was some counterplay to Assassins. Like, you had to outsmart them in their positioning. But now it's just straight up put them in the back, and they're probably not going to get hit, so... Anyways, okay, demons. So they're nerfing 2 demons rather is getting a decent little nerf. You know, 20% is significant, but the going down to 35% off of 50, that's a 30% nerf. It's That's pretty huge. And then a really big nerf on 6 demons, which is pretty rare. But 4 demons was fairly common if you ran like Varus, Brand, Morgana, and Aatrox. And like the biggest problem with demons, like the mana burn is unfun. They're saying a little strong. It's a little strong. It was only played by like over half of every single lobby, every single game. It's a little on the strong side. But like, so the things that made Demon really strong, and I talked about this in my meta overview video, so go check that out. It's interesting. So the times are changing a little bit. I'm going to do a new one for 9:15 if you like this, so check it out. But I'll scroll down here real quick, and this is the Google Doc to the video, and I do one of these for every video like this, the meta overview, tier list, things like that, so be sure to check it out. But the thing that made them really strong is each one of their core champions was independently very powerful. Like, there was not a weak link here with 4 assassins. Like, Varus does a ton of damage, has a lot of range, attack speed, he has good synergies, you know, potentially with Rangers early, so you could play him with Vayne, you could play him with Ashe. He could carry. You know, Morgana, very strong champion, good synergy with Sorcerers. Aatrox, really strong Blade Master synergy. Brand, very strong. Elementalist were one of the most OP things on the last patch. So, like, the problem is these 4 champs were independently really powerful. You had multiple different ways you could carry. So you could carry through physical damage with the Draven option. You throw in a Shin and a Draven. You could hard carry if you got physical damage stuff. You could hard carry if you got kind of just tank items and you want to tank out Aatrox with, like, Gunblade plus Dragon Claw. And just have him go to work up front. Or you could carry through AP. You know, you could just do like a Morelos, Luden, Shojin on Brand. So there were just so many different options that it was like you really couldn't fail if you were going for these champs. And even if other people were going for this build, you can get silver champs and you don't need to get gold. But there were just so many different things. You know, the Draven option was very common and very, very strong because then you have the combination of Brand magic, Morg magic, plus Draven, like hyper physical damage. Elemental option. And you could do this off of very, very few champions, so you could do this only level 6, which allowed you to roll to make sure that you get silver on these things, too. A lot of the strongest comps, you got to be at least, like, level 7 before they, like, completely come together. But with demons, you could really get them at level 6. And you even had a glacial option. You could even go Ashe Volley, and that would give you some glacials, and then that would be, like, an on-hit. If you needed an on-hit option, you could do, like, Red Buff, Breaker, Hush, Curse Blade, BT, whatever, on Volibear. And then Ashe. And then you'd get the Glacial plus the Ranger bonus on Ashe and Varus. So there was really just no way you could go wrong with demons. So that's what made them strong. And it looks like they are nerfing them very, very hard, which I think is well-deserved. So Varus' damage is going down 50. So they're basically nerfing each one of those core champions that I mentioned here. They're not Brand. They're not nerfing Brand, who probably still needs a nerf, but they are nerfing Kennen in a little bit, so maybe they think that's enough for the elemental nerf. But yeah, Varus is losing 50 damage. That's not going to, like, completely break the bank on him. Level 1, though, is losing 100, which is good. I mean, why does this do... He has 75 mana, by the way, so he triggers this, like, pretty reasonably quickly, especially if you have a Ranger buff with, like, a Vayne or something. Why does it do 400 damage AoE, like, across the whole map at level 1? It's just, like, way too much. 550 at level 2 is a bit more reasonable. That kind of pulls him in line with other mages. But he also has 0.7 attack speed and, like, 4 range. So he still is stronger than, like, a decent chunk of mages. Now, mages do stack their mana up faster, but, you know, he has other stuff going for him, too. So I think it's a very good nerf on him. He was one of the strongest champions last patch. So that's good. Aatrox... Once again, way too much damage. Why 400 damage for level 1 Aatrox? So they're nerfing that down to 250. So they're saying, you know what? This is going to be way weaker early game. It's still going to be respectable early game, but not, like, absurdly overpowered early game. And then they're taking off a little bit here, 600. I mean, this thing, especially against Yordles, Aatrox would just almost one-shot Yordles. Like, no joke. Because, yeah, they can dodge his normal attacks. And that means he won't generate mana from normal attacks, but his ultimate, like, they're going to be hitting him. And they don't do a lot of damage typically, at least early game. Yordles don't. So he's going to slam that Poppy on the front line for, like, 700 damage, which is going to be, like, 70% of her health, you know, early on. So they're nerfing that a little bit to take it down to 600. I think this is more reasonable. He's still going to be strong, but that's a little bit less OP, especially in the early levels. His health's also going down to 700, so you can kill him a little bit faster. Now, I assume that's level 1 health. 750 was extremely high for level 1 health too. I mean, when you think about, I mean, he is a tier 3 champion, but I think even things like Volibear, didn't Volibear have like 650 or something? Like the tank. This guy's like a carry bruiser type of thing. He does way more damage than most other tanks up there. So anyways, good nerfs to Aatrox. And then Morgana damage is getting smacked as well. So early game losing 100 and then 325. Now, so you're going to lose more early if you go for this build, but games do last longer. You know, you take less damage over time. You do get a little bit more compensation for loss streaks. So they're making it a lot weaker early, but you're still going to have some power later if you go for that build. So I think that's pretty reasonable. We'll see. I mean, this might completely nerf it out of the meta. They are buffing up a lot of tank-style champions. And this build is not, like, super amazing against heavy tanks, although it's okay. You can still mana burn them. But the thing with tanks is, like, if they take a lot of damage, they're going to get mana anyways. And I believe I read on the wiki that mana charges before mitigation. Mana from taking damage is pre-mitigation capped at 50. So that means if you have a lot of armor, even if you're not taking a lot of damage, you're still gaining a lot of mana. So these tanks are going to have a lot of mana. So, like, yeah, you can mana burn them, but they're going to get that mana back. So I think that tanks are going to be a pretty good answer to demons on this patch, but we'll see. So yeah, I like the changes. I like the direction. They were oppressive. I wouldn't even mind them being out of the meta for a patch here. They've been, like, really OP last patch, and the patch before that they were pretty good. So they can take a seat and give some other people a chance for the next couple of weeks. Okay, dragons. They are not fully immune anymore to magic, which I think this is fair. Like, full immunity is ridiculous. Like, 83% is still, like, very, very immune, you know, to stuff. But it's not like, you know, your sorcerer comp just absolutely cannot kill the Shyvana. 100% cannot kill her. So I think that's nice. And in exchange, they're giving Soul 50 more damage on his ult. They're giving him 50 more health. And they're giving Shyvana 10 more armor, which is really nice. So I think that's a good change. You know, they could use a little help overall. I think this is probably a net. It's tough to say. Against certain kinds of comps, it's a net buff. I like the damage on Soul. I think that sorcerers did get buffed recently. I think people were kind of sleeping on Soul. Like, I feel like Wilds were on the cusp. I had them at number 5 on my meta, or number 4 maybe on my meta tier list. So I think they're like on the cusp of being viable again, because they got several buffs. The thing that's hurting them the most is the reworking of the attack speed stacking. So that's what really hurt them, because now it's multiplicative rather than additive. So the 0.7, because before, if you had 50% attack speed and you had a 0.7 base, that'd be a 1.2 attack speed because it was additive. It's 0.7 plus 0.5 would be 1.2 attack speed on everybody. That's really fast. But now the 50% is just like an extra 50% of it. So it would only be 1.05. It'd be 0.35 plus 0.7 would be 0.105. So it doesn't, or 1.05. So it doesn't sound like it matters too much, but it's actually a pretty big deal for Wilds. But they did buff Ahri last patch. They buffed Sorcerers last patch. They're buffing Shyvana here. Her armor, they're buffing Soul twice. Magic immunity is relevant against a lot of different comps, though. So we'll see. But I think that's probably fair. Okay, Elementalist. They're buffing Brand's damage, which I think is really scary. I don't know why they're doing that. Like, Elementalists are already some of the strongest champs out there. I mean, like, the demons did get nerfed a lot, so the demon version with Brand is going to be weaker, but you can splash Elementalist into a lot of things, you know? And so I'm scared to buff Brand because I think he's already, like, very, very strong. But they are giving him 50 more damage. Silver's where you're mostly going to have him at 50 more damage. Lissandra is terrible, but, like, 75 extra damage is pretty legit. I mean, that's an AoE ability, and she has defense, and she's a tier 2 champion. So I don't think she's OP, but she is going to be a lot better. So this is probably best for, like, Glacial Elementals, the old school build that I talked about before, where you would run, like, 4 Glacials and then 3 Elementals. Because you already have Lissandra as part of that, and in theory you could get Anivia as part of that. They're buffing Braum a lot on this patch, so, like, Braum plus Leona could be pretty good with that. Sejuani got a buff, I think, last patch. She might get another buff this patch. So maybe we'll see some glacials come back in. Yeah, it'd be interesting if they go back to that old school build. So I think that's good. And then the demon nerfs wouldn't matter at all if you were doing that with Brand. So that just makes... Now, Kennen does get weaker here in a second, for sure. Like, later... He's still okay early game. But, anyways, that's just something to think of. Glacial Elementals might be worth thinking about here. So, yeah, you pulled some power out of Golem. But, dude, they're OP. Like, they're in almost every build. Like, every build is, like, demons... With like if it's not demons, the only comp that does not like have an elemental option is gunslingers. Usually, you might even be able to fit them in there. Realistically, at 7, you could still get it, but I don't know. Like you see elementalists everywhere, and Daisy is so freaking like she takes forever to kill. Like there's still and Brand is really like Brand and Kennen are still independently super powerful. Like it's okay that Lysandra sucks because like I don't know. If they were going to do this, I would have nerfed Golems. I would have nerfed Golem again if they're going to do this. But anyways, okay, so Elemental is going to be stronger here. As long as it's not the Demon Elementalist. Okay, Guardians. So this is actually kind of nutty. These numbers are already reflected on the PBE here. Or on this, on the wiki. Although this patch doesn't actually go live until tomorrow. But look at this. Where is he? So, like, Leona, 100 armor. Level 1 Leona, 100 armor. The bigger one, though, is Braum. Level 1, 75 armor. Isn't Chain Vest is, like, 20, right? Like, they are literally giving this guy, like 2 Chain Vests for free on the house. At level 1. 750 health, level 1. With a double, like, 75 armor. You're never killing this dude. Early game, like, he'll take you to time. Like, I don't know. That's pretty dangerous. Like, yeah, Braum wasn't, like, that popular last patch, but this is like, pretty ridiculous, I think. So that's another thing that's going to make, like, Elementals. Because, like, Braum was kind of a joke. You wouldn't run him with Glacials before. But now, like... Realistically, you can get to 6 glacials now. Like, before, you would only go to 4 because Braum was, like, terrible. And, you know, Anivia, you can't really count on getting her because she's tier 5. But now, you know, maybe. I mean, like, you could run 6. Like, if you run 6 glacials with Braum and Leona, like... You're just never going to kill that team, I don't think. It's going to be really hard. So, that's a huge buff. So, yeah, they're independently giving them 50 extra armor for Braum. So, it's 2.5 Chain Vests for free. Level 1. And Leona is 45. Which is going to make her, like, very strong, too. And then 50 armor per stack. Now, they don't stack on each other anymore. But, yeah, that's still pretty disgusting. Now, the thing about this comp, though, is, like, it lacks damage, so traditionally you've brought elementals with it, but... I mean, I don't know, like, bringing in this, if you just had, like, a bunch of on-hit stuff with Volley, maybe? I mean, Volley can carry if you just stack him up with... Like, he got nerfed some, but, like, if you still put, like, a rapid-fire cannon and, I don't know, like a Bloodthirster or something on him, he can still carry, or just like just put some on-hit stuff on him, Curse or whatever, and the fight will take so long you'll eventually kill him. So, I don't know. It's interesting. It's definitely interesting. So maybe this is how they're wanting to nerf gunslingers. It's just like, hey, you know what? We're just gonna like, we're just gonna throw like just jack up the armor like hardcore, and just make like glacials like hard counter, gunslingers or something. Maybe that's their plan. Yeah, very tempting. Just how do you get damage into this build? You know, like I said, like the elemental option's looking good. That would require 6. You could get elementals on 6 pretty comfortably, I think, and have 4 glacials. So you would have Lysandra, Ashe, Sejuani, Volley, and then Brand Cannon, and you could have Glacials on 6. So that could be pretty good. And then 7, you could throw in Leona for Guardian. And yeah, Brand or Kennen could carry. Now, Kennen's getting nerfed, but Brand could definitely be a major carry, or Volibear. So you'd have an AP option. You'd have Volibear option. I guess Ashe can carry too. You could throw in like Vayne or Varus. Maybe Kindred. I have to see just one other Ranger, and maybe carry with Ashe. I don't know. It's interesting. I like. Okay. I like they're bringing like some of this stuff back into the fold. Or you could like Nobles option, or Nobles option with Leona if you want to go 6 Nobles and throw in a if you can get to 6 Nobles and throw in a Braum. I mean, they're just never going to kill your team. So there's a couple of different like tank options that are really good. We'll talk about Nobles and Knights here in a second, but they're definitely buffing up a lot of the tanks like big time. And I think Guardians are definitely the most notable because of the insane buff to Braum, the 50 armor on a level 2 champ. Okay. So yeah, he's going to be your worst nightmare if you're trying to run gunslingers. Okay. So Knights. Now, this is interesting, and we'll have to see how this plays out. But Knights historically have been pretty bad, and like the reason why Knights are bad are because a lot of late-game champions, like most of their damage is dealt with magic or critical strikes. So Assassins aren't really like in the meta anymore, and I think they're definitely going to be out of the meta after, you know, those changes, if it works the way that I think. Once again, I have not seen it in action, but that's the way that it's reading to me, is that the Assassins are going to have a problem. But a lot of damage is magic damage late game, whether it's through on hit type of stuff like Static Shiv or Ionic Spark or whatever, or it's just abilities that are doing a lot of damage. Most damage in most fights is going to be magic damage, unless it's like you're against Draven or something like that. So, or like Yasuo. I mean, I get like the I guess Blade Masters maybe, maybe, but I still feel like magic is a lot of the damage. So this will stop some like magic dot type of damage. Honey, why is that so loud? What is that? Hold on, let me shut this door. I've got these headphones on, and usually I can't hear anything from the other room, but it sounds like, I don't know if y'all could hear that. It sounds like it's screaming like R&B or something in the other room. I don't know. Anyways, so now your entire team, not just the Knights, but your entire team ignores so much damage from all sources. And I assume this is pre-mitigation. But I don't know. But like the thing that I'm thinking about, this is going to cancel the most, are champions that do like tick damage, like little ticks over time. So like Kennen or something comes to mind. If we look at like Kennen's damage, maybe like so like look at this. Okay, so it deals 64 magic every half a second. So this is going to block every single tick of that. So if you had 30 block on this, that would block like 50% of this damage. Because every single time it ticks, it blocks it. So things that do little chip damage like that. So like Kennen is the biggest one that I could think of just like right off the top of my head. Things like Ionic Spark will be blocked partially by this. Static Shiv will be partially blocked by this now. It will not block, I don't believe. It says all sources, but I assume true damage doesn't count, just like in League. But things like red buff, true damage, and I think Morello's is also true damage. True damage, yeah. So the red buff and the Morello are not going to be negated by this. That's important to note on that end. And there's like Titanic Hydra will be partially blocked by this. Like Vayne Silver Bolts will not be blocked. So I think, so the biggest loser there is Kennen, and Kennen's going to get nerfed again here in a second. But I mean, like brand jumps and things like that will be blocked a little bit. I think that about covers most. demon damage is true damage, so that won't be blocked. Like Spiderling damage, so this is going to nerf like Elise pretty hard there. Like Spiderling damage will be blocked pretty hard. Honey, can you turn that down? I don't even know if she can hear me over that. Jesus. Okay, yeah, that's all I can think of. Okay, that reduces mana and grants a shield, but doesn't actually do damage. Extra damage Cassidon. So yeah, I think that about covers that. But yeah, so interesting counter to some specific champions, but still useful a lot of times. Okay. On like gun, so another nerf. Well, I don't know how that interacts with gunslingers. Like previous knights would block 40, I believe, from the gunslinger attacks. So I think this is a nerf. So it's a nerf if they're just straight up. Most of the damage is coming from normal basic attacks, but this applies to everyone on your team too, including people that are not only knights. So if you just want to splash like 2 knights or whatever, it'll actually be a lot better if you're just splashing 2 knights. So it'll be worse for those 2 knights a little bit in the early game versus basic attacks. But as the game goes on, it will help your entire team, especially against, you know, the type of stuff that I described before, like big AoE damage, most notably from like Kennen, Ionic, Static Shiv, things like that. Volibear, lightning splashes, stuff like that. Okay, so that's good. And they're buffing up the armor on a lot of the knights. So like 15 armor on Darius, Garen, Mordekaiser, Sejuani. They basically all start at 40 armor, pretty much. And Sejuani's stun is going up at level 2 to 4 seconds. So, yeah. Poppy they're not touching, but I think Poppy already had 40 AD, or 40 armor, and Poppy was probably the strongest knight, either Poppy or Sejuani. Not excluding Kayle, of course, if people were able to run Kayle in their comp. But yeah, I think this is going to be a lot better. So now you can maybe run 4 knights. So knights are still going to be fairly weak to magic, like burst magic, but some of this like chip damage magic they'll be better against. The extra armor is a big deal. That's like Darius Garen early is going to be like the front line. Like that's going to beat every other like early army, especially if you do nobles, which we'll talk about here in a second. Noble Knights is unequivocally the best opener now if you're looking to streak early, and now they're more useful even later on to the game. You can splash in, like you can feel a little bit better about like, you know, keeping that Darius around later with your Poppy, or keeping Darius around so you get the Imperial buff with your Draven, as long as you have another knight in there with you. So, or like Sejuani, you know, when you're transitioning with Glacials and you still want to keep your you know, your Silver Garen or whatever with your Sejuani for a little bit, you can feel better about that. So that's good. Now, will you actually want to go like 6 knights? Probably not. And like the big reason is 5 of the 6 are melee, and if you run too much melee, it's just like some of your champions are just going to sit there, especially if they ball up in the corner. So that could potentially be kind of rough. But I could see maybe 4 knights sometimes, sort of. If you run like Darius, Garen early, and then like Poppy and maybe Sejuani. Or I guess you could go, I'm going to like have a whole meta video where I talk about this stuff. So I haven't like mapped it all out yet. But I mean, I guess you could go Mordekaiser, and that could open you up. I'm trying to think. If you go Mordekaiser, then you could get like Kindred, and that might allow you to do Rangers. Like I have seen some builds like that do okay with like Kindred, Vayne, Ashe, Varus. The problem is like none of those really have a lot of overlap. Like none of them have the same overlapping traits with the Rangers. I don't believe there's a single overlap. Like I don't think there's a single overlapping buff. But if you run Knights with them, then you do have Garen. You need one other champion for... You have Mordekaiser. who would give you the Phantom buff or whatever, which is, it's okay. I mean, it basically kills someone on the enemy team if they don't have healing, like, at the start of the fight. So if you get that on their, like, hyper carry, that can be good. But you could do Vayne, Garen, and I don't know if you could get one other noble in there. I don't know. There's probably possibilities. So I think it's interesting. You know, the biggest comps this is going to counter is going to be gunslingers again. So I think that's nice. Just freaking punt them, dude. I hate that build. I just feel like it's such a gambler's build. You just sit there and just like AFK roll and just hope that you get 2 or 3 like gold champions in that build, and just hope that you get like, you know, the perfect items. Like you're getting your Curse Blade, red buff, rapid fire cannon. If you do, you're OP. If you don't, oh well, next game. You know, I don't know. I feel like Skara described it as a very mindless strategy as well. I mean, it can be all right, but I think it's just too oppressive. So I'm happy to see gunslingers. I mean, maybe I'm going to be annoyed by all of the tanks on this patch. We'll see, but I think that's interesting. Okay. Ninjas. That does also, I mean, that also helps demons, sort of. Like, you wouldn't think that it does. I mean, none of these are demons, so I guess that hurts. But, like, anything that does true damage, so it does buff Vayne up with the true damage. It's going to buff Void up, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then, like, demons do true damage when they mana burn. I don't know. It's interesting. It'll, like, knights have been terrible forever, like, beyond just opening with knights and then getting rid of them later. So I think that's nice. I think the Guardian might be a little over the top. I don't think Guardians were that bad, honestly, last patch. Like, Braum early is not that great, but I feel like they're going to nerf him after, or maybe hotfix him after that. But anyways, let's move on. Okay, so ninjas. This looks really OP when I first saw it, and then you see the nerfs to Cannon and Akali, and you're like, oh. But they're changing it from 40% extra AD for 1, and then 80% extra AD for 2, to 40 flat AD, which is way stronger early game on the auto attacks. I mean, if you think about something like Kennen, I don't know what his exact numbers are. I think he's got like 65 AD, maybe. Yeah, exactly 65 AD. See, I kind of know my stuff. 65 AD, so getting 40% of that would be like an extra like 25 or something AD, but this is 40 extra early. And it's giving you 40 AP. So that means that you're doing 40% extra damage on all of your ability damage. You're like, as soon as I read that, I was like, holy crap, Kennen is OP now. But then you come down here and look at Kennen, and he lost 200 damage on his silver ult. 175 on his tier 1 ult. That is massive. That is massive. I mean, like, 40% extra damage on this. Well, actually, maybe it's not as big as I thought it was. So, let's see. 40% extra damage on this right here is going to be... Maybe I jumped the gun on it. So, 10% is 45 times 4 is 180. Which is only really a 20 damage nerf. Okay. Because it didn't used to give any AP. Okay, maybe it's not as bad as I thought. What is it on Akali? So, 40% on Akali is going to be... that one's a bit harder. So like 28 basically times 4 is what, 80 plus 32, 112. No, that one's a lot worse. So it's like 100, 120 just for easy numbers. So to take it up to 390 effective damage at silver, for 40%. Okay, so once again, I'm going to have a whole meta video where I map all this out, because I just don't have I'm already going to be pushing up close to an hour because there's a ton of stuff here. But this is okay, it's a little more interesting than I thought it was then. So, like, Kennen is actually net neutral, or close. And then if you go for the full ninja, so the AP, so he's losing, what was it, like 20 or 30 damage on his ult, but he's gaining... something like 12 extra damage per auto attacks. He was gaining 28. Now he's gaining 40 AD early. The losing 175 rank 1, though, that's definitely, like, unequivocally really bad, I think, right? So, yeah. 40% of that would be an extra, like, 90 damage. Yeah, so he's losing, like, 90 damage on that, roughly. So, yeah, rank 1 Kennen, Massive nerf to his magic damage. Rank 2 cannon, not that bad. Rank 2 cannon's a similar damage profile. And he's only a tier 3 champion, so usually you can get him to silver by, like, he's very heavily contested. At least he was last patch, so you can usually get him, like, in the mid-game to silver, though, especially if games are going a little bit longer. You know, games might go an extra 3 rounds or something with the buffs, or with the changes. Okay, the real winner here, though, probably is Shen, because he's already, like, Blade Masters are pretty popular. We'll see if that changes, because this is also, like, all of this is also going to nerf Draven pretty hard, like, all the extra armor, because there's not an armor pin item in the game right now, so Draven's going to have a hard time cutting through all this crap. If you've got Guardians plus Knights plus, like, the Noble buff, and you're just stacking up armor on stuff, it could be kind of rough on him. Which I'm fine with that. Draven's really OP right now. Okay, so nice on Shen. He gets plus 7 attack speed, and he gets 40 flat extra damage early, so he's going to be a powerhouse early, but he doesn't benefit at all from the AP, because his ult just, you dodge stuff. So, doesn't benefit from that. Zed is a nice beneficiary too, but Zed kind of sucks. He is getting double buff, though, so maybe, like, Ninja Elementalist, I guess? Maybe? Ninja Assassin Elementalist, that would take 7 to do that. I mean, assassins are not that great on this patch, like we said before. I guess you're only one, you know, you're 2 assassins deep with this. So yeah, just one more assassin, like a Kha'Zix or something maybe. You won't have the void buff. I don't know. It's interesting. It's interesting. I kind of like it. If you have the full ninja, it's actually, I think, net, like, more damage on Kennen's ult. But there's a lot of, once again, you've got the Knight's buff is going to hurt Kennen a lot, too. Okay, interesting changes. Okay, Nobles. This one's going to be pretty cool. So, Juan, I know you're going to love this on the stream. He always loves Nobles, wants me to go Nobles. This is definitely, I think, pretty big buffs to Nobles. So you still get 35 on hit, but instead of 100 armor, you're getting 60 armor and 60 magic resist. So now you're pretty good against magic. Vayne is also getting, like, pretty good buffs. Her damage is going down, so she's going down to 40 damage. But she is getting an extra 0.1 attack speed. So 0.75 is pretty good. She should have always had that attack speed. But now, I mean, she can be a pretty good counter to a lot of the tanks that are going to be coming out. You have a pretty good tank package yourself. Nobles is, like, the biggest question mark for me on this patch, because a lot of them are getting buffed. Like, Garen's attack damage is going down a little bit, but his attack speed is going up, which means he's going to trigger this on-hit health stuff more. His ability damage is, wow, it's down a lot early, though. Okay, so you can actually move while you're spinning, though. That's actually a really big buff for Garen. But you can get to him silver, like, really early, usually. So, like, maybe the ultra early levels, it's not as good. But late game, it's definitely more if you go for golden Garen, which is rare, but I don't know. It's interesting to me, like, the Vayne buff, especially with how prevalent I think tanks are going to be on this patch, and just how much armor some crap is going to, like, these menaces like Braum, how much freaking armor they're going to have early. Thornmail is going to be damn good. Because remember, Thornmail, it's all damage that you mitigate, not just from Thornmail, but from all of your resistances, at least from armor. And I think it's literally all resistances. It says all damage mitigated, period. It gives you armor. Physical damage mitigated. Okay. So, like, if you have a lot of armor, that makes it really, really OP. Because it's the damage that you block, not the damage that you take. So the more armor you have, actually, the more damage this does. So that's going to really jack gunslingers. Like a Thornmail on Braum or something early is going to destroy gunslingers and like Draven and things like that. Huh. So, you know, my thing, as always, with Knights is that the Kale. That's the sticking point, is like, can you actually get a Kale? Or not Knights, Nobles. I mean, it's a thing with Knights, too, if you want 6 Knights, which I still don't think is going to be a thing. But Nobles is the Kale. So they've been giving a lot of these champions buffs. So like Garen's getting buffs here. Fiora was buffed quite a bit a few patches ago. She's still not amazing, but she is Blade Master, which is kind of like Shin's going to be stronger on this patch. So it's kind of interesting. So she's kind of a weaker Link, but I mean, Leona just got buffed like crazy this patch. Now you could just easily splash a Braum in here or something while you wait on Kayle. Like there's probably going to be some options where you could run at least like keep 3 Nobles and feel pretty good about it and keep a couple more on your bench while you wait on Kayle. I mean, one perk here is a lot of these are very cheap champions. Like 3 of them are tier 1 champs. You could easily get them to silver and just keep them on your bench just in case you get Kayle later. Have them as like a plan B. You could just keep your silver Fiora and your Garen, and it's not a huge tax on you. It's just 3 gold to hold them, just to see if you get it later. Vayne, like I said, might be independently pretty strong against a lot of these tank type of comps, especially if you run Rangers with her. Lucian, you can still do Gunslingers potentially with Lucian. Leona independently. So I think each one, well, like the Garen, Lucian, Leona, and Vayne, I could see you maybe keeping around in some comps. And then see it like power leveling up to like 6 or 7. Because like if you get these 6 plus Braum in here, I just think you never die, right? Because you're healing 35 per hit, and everybody on your team is going to be getting 110 armor off the Guardian buff with 60 magic resist. So unless they have like just a ton of true damage, it's not happening. Okay, anyway, so interesting. Don't know if people will fully commit to Nobles, but they're definitely a hell of a lot stronger early game. So like I said, Knights, Nobles early, like that's the opener. Everybody's going to be doing that, I think. And it should massacre Gunslingers like real hard, which is going to make me smile, but I'm probably going to end up hating Knights, Nobles by the end of this patch. Anyways, okay, Pirates. Average gold up marginally. Okay, Graves' attack speed is up a little bit. Twisted Fate, maybe a little bit less bad. That's all right, but the thing is, like, I think Gunslingers, after reading all of this and really, like, thinking about all of it, I think they're going to be in trouble this patch. I don't know, though. I mean, like, it's hard to underestimate, you know, a 4 Gunslinger buff on Tristana with, like, 2 Cursed Blades or something, you know, just taking all of your team down to 0 stars. We'll see. We'll see how it goes, but it's interesting. Okay, Void. So this one's pretty interesting. I thought Void was never like super awful. Like I said, I did very well with like Void Assassins with Brawlers. Like I went up like 1 million divisions when the game came out before they nerfed like Volibear and Assassins. But now Void units deal true damage. So this is a lot more intriguing. Now, a lot of these champions are not that independently strong, though. Like, Kassadin early game can be very good. He's still going to get smacked, I think, by Brawlers. Although, I don't know. Maybe if you put some items on him. But I think this does open up kind of the Void Brawlers build that I've mentioned before. And maybe you could go... I've thought about Sorcerers with Kassadin, because he's a Sorcerer class. So you could throw in something like, I don't know, a Lulu and a Soul, or a Lulu and an Ahri or something. I don't really know what it would be. But the thing is, he doesn't benefit that heavily from AP, because it just reduces the target's mana. I think it increases your shield by a certain amount, but like, so if you're a silver and you have like 50 AP, you'd get a 60 shield instead of a 40 shield. It's like, does that really matter? I mean, it kind of does. But, like, I don't know. It's tough to say. Like, I'm thinking, you know, once again, I'll have an entire meta video where I, you know, math this out a little bit more and think about it some more. But it's intriguing. So it could be an answer to all of the armor stuff. The best thing I was able to come up with is if you go Void Brawlers and you stack Cho'Gath with something like Warmogs, Red Buff, and Titanic Hydra, because Titanic applies on-hit effects. So that would turn him into, you know, he could spread all of the healing to stop things like Nobles or to stop other Warmogs users. And he would be doing a hell of a lot of, I believe, I don't know if true damage, the thing is like, does true damage apply to items? Because it says that they deal true damage, right? Where was it? Void. Yeah, so it says they deal true damage. But does that include items? If it includes items, then, you know, maybe stuff like Static Shiv or Ludens or Ionic Spark or Titanic Hydra become a lot more interesting. Because, like Cho, if you put Titanic on him, it's going to have, like, 2,000 plus health. So he's going to be doing an extra 200 damage that splashes to everybody and does true damage, right? So if it works that way. And his base attack is probably like 80 or something. So he's probably doing like between, I don't know, 250 and 300 damage splash on everybody, true damage. So that could be interesting. So I don't know. Void is interesting. They are buffing a lot of the Void stuff a bit. So they're giving it more attack damage here. Kha'Zix is getting some big buffs. I mean, going to 300 damage here and extra attack damage. Rek'Sai is getting more damage across the board. So they are buffing Void, and maybe you can just slot them in. It's just the problem is they don't have like a hard carry, except maybe that Cho'Gath build if Titanic does true damage off of that. But they do slot in extremely well with Brawlers. So, you know, because Cho is a Void Brawler and Rek'Sai is a Void Brawler. So you really just need to throw in like Volibear and Warwick or Blitzcrank or something like that, and it can work. So it's interesting. Stay tuned for my meta video. I'll go into that a bit more. We just have a couple more minutes here, but it's interesting. Will it fully counter, you know, like the Braum Glacials with, you know, like Guardian Knight builds and things like that? Maybe. I don't know. We'll see. But it's possible. It's a possible thing. Yordles, okay, so they are nerfing 6 Yordles a little bit, but they're buffing 3 Yordles. So I had seen some 3 Yordle comps with like demons working. I'm not really sure what you would do here. You do have knights with Poppy. You can do Elementalist with Kennen still. So I think there will be some builds where you'll just incidentally get 3 Yordles. I think Poppy, because she's a knight, she can do knights, Yordles, and be like really tanky. So I don't know. We'll see. I think I know I'm saying that a lot. There's just a lot that's up in the air for this. I think it's good. I think that the 3 Yordles getting 5%, I mean, it's not going to be totally game breaking. Now, one thing that is super important, I don't know if they said it here, also dodges on hit effects. Why the hell didn't it do this before? So that's why gunslingers were wrecking me. I didn't understand that. I was just like, why the hell, like, I'm dodging all these attacks, but they keep, like, cursing me immediately, shrinking me at the start of a fight, even though I'm dodging 60%. Like, what? It's because it never dodged on hits. Anyways, so Yordles are still going to be weak to magic, but I think 3 Yordle will be something that's a lot more interesting. The thing is, like, Trist and Veigar, to an extent, are not really strong Yordles in that build, because you don't put a lot of items on Trist with Yordles. So, but I think Poppy's really good, Lulu's good, and Kennen's good. So I think there has to be a home for some of them. I guess Veigar's like serviceable. Gnar can be good. So maybe, I mean, with like wilds, you could go wild Yordles maybe. Wild Yordle Elementalist, because then like you'd have the 4 wilds, you'd have Gnar. Elementalists aren't part of wilds at all, so I guess it would take 7, and then maybe Lulu could be your 8th. I don't know. It's sketchy unless you get a if you get a Yumi or whatever. Maybe you could do it with that. I don't know. It'll be interesting, but yeah, I think that's probably a good direction to move. Gnar gets a little buff, Veigar gets a buff, Lulu gets a slight nerf. That's probably fair. Okay, last couple of things here. Okay, Blitzcrank gets a little bit buffed to mana. Fine. Ashe, okay, good. Kindred, good. So these are both Rangers, which can definitely add up when they get a lot of attack speed. Morgana takes longer to get her ult off. That's fair. She's a really OP champ. Yasuo getting more damage, okay. They're giving a lot of AD, if you're wondering. They're giving a lot of AD to champions because they know that like tanks are going to be really strong on this patch. So I think that's pretty smart. Karthus still probably going to be weak. But that certainly makes him a bit more interesting. At tier 1, you hit 5 targets for 100 more damage. Then the last couple of seconds here. Locket is terrible now. Is the TLDR there. It only lasts for 4 seconds at the start of fight, so you only want to put it on frontliners, not backliners. So you probably don't want to do that anymore. Onyx Spark is losing a lot of damage. Also, Knights are going to block a lot of it now. Even 2 Knights will put a significant dent in that. So I think that's pretty well deserved. Hush, 3 seconds instead of 5. Thank God. Now they actually have to proc it multiple times in a row. It's not as certain that you're going to be permanently hushed. But anyways, that's going to be it. Thank you very much. Static Shiv, damage down, also good. I'll see everybody next time. Have a great day.